Hello, folks. Welcome to Pushing the Boundaries. You remember great leadership, and I had the pleasure and honour of serving under Andy Marsh, Chief Constable for Avon and Somerset Police. His inspirational and empowering leadership will stay with me forever. Andy is a modern and innovative leader who understands how to bring technology and people together in order to maximise the efficiency, effectiveness and legitimacy of an organisation. His use of data and analytics has received international acclaim, creating a blueprint for others to learn from. A strong believer of turning adversity into advantage, the obstacle has become the way to sustain and improve the service to the public during austere times and more recently, those COVID-affected times. And today, I'm going to find out all the secret ingredients for creating a successful data-driven organisation. So with that, you can go and push the boundaries and transform your ways of working. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you this morning, Andy. Andy Marsh, Chief Constable.
Sean, thank you. You're an old friend. I loved working with you. You helped me push those boundaries, and I'm very humbled by your introduction. Thank you.
Andy, obviously, pleasure's all mine, but thank you, very, very kind. But I think what the audience will be loving to hear today, really, starting off, is what's it actually like to be a Chief Constable? What's a typical day, if there is one?
Well, I never thought I'd get to be a chief. I just wanted to be a police officer and make a difference. And I've always seen the goals in front of me and the doors open. I've been a chief in two forces. So I'm the only UK serving chief that's led two forces now. My previous force was Hampshire. And my typical day is very different during COVID to the typical day pre-COVID. It involves meeting people who've done brilliant work, listening to ideas, juggling a budget of about £327 million currently, dealing with a very significant operational risk around the most serious of crimes and tragedy, but also dealing with a long-term view as well about how do we make Avon and Somerset an outstanding police force for everyone. So it's a brilliant job. I love it, Sean. And the reason I'm still in it is I'm still learning. I've not cracked it yet.
No, that's very good. And you talk about dealing with risk, dealing with things that great things, but also things that are really quite harrowing and disturbing and very touching. How do you keep your mindset in the right place? It's tough. It's a tough world, isn't it?
I think one of the magic ingredients, if you're going to flourish in policing at any role, let alone chief, is positivity and resilience. You've talked about turning the obstacle into the way. Lots of things happen which are tragic, very, very bad on occasions. Our job is to stop them where possible, but we can't do that every single time. And so where there are obstacles, what are the opportunities? This afternoon, I've got a misconduct hearing. I'd rather not be chairing a misconduct hearing, but the opportunity there is to turn what has happened into learning. So that's what keeps me going, is finding opportunity and positives in every situation that we face.
Yes, and I know from being part of your organisation, I know that you really built and developed that learning culture. And again, I talk about it all the time. Outside, I take that with me, and I think yes, there's always a long way to go on these things, but that learning culture is a preventative culture, isn't it? And that's so important today in terms of the risk and the things you've got to deal with, isn't it?
It is, Sean, because things are going to go wrong, and blame is not the answer. Learning is the answer. I think the other thing that sustains us in policing is what I call, for every leader, keep it real. Why are we in this job? We're in this job to protect vulnerable people, catch criminals, prevent harm, make society a better place to live in. So any opportunity that any leader has to refocus, sometimes many times a day, on why are we doing this, why are we doing it, short, medium, long term, and stories are one of the most powerful ways we do that. And so I talk on a weekly, daily basis sometimes to people across the whole organization, 6,500 people, to keep it real and remind them through their work, not what I'm doing, their work, the difference they're making, because that's what we all need to keep in the forefront of our minds if we're to stay as motivated now as we were the day we walked into policing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's creating an organizational mindset. And when you think of policing, where it's you obviously 30 years or more, I guess now, Andy, you've seen a lot of change and you've managed a lot of change. What kind of current challenges do you see policing facing now, and also what's coming around the corner?
So the challenges keep coming, and I guess in one respect that makes it an impossible job. But I'm talking about operational policing now. But the question is, what sort of people thrive in impossible jobs? Brilliant people, because they're constantly reaching for a little bit more, a little bit better. So the challenges have been a massive change in demand, an increase in vulnerability, such as mental ill health, child abuse, domestic abuse, people trafficking, modern slavery. I could go on. So vulnerability, the demand on policing has changed. So whilst some crime types have gone down, crime represents less than 20% of what our people do. And those demands have significantly increased. I think there's been some impacts from austerity on public services. And that's a third demand. A third demand is money. We've not had enough money to meet all of those complex and ambiguous demands. And then a fourth demand is a demand on our people. It's a wonderful job, policing, and it's a privilege to be in it. But you've got to look after your people. I talk about one of our values being caring. We care about victims of crime. We care about what we stand for. But if you want people to care about those things, we need to care about each other. And so actually health and well-being of the brave men and women at every level in policing is something that has been a pressure on us over these last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that technology has a key role in supporting those things you were saying there, Andy. And how have you brought people and technology together? Has it played a key role in tackling those things for you?
I wouldn't in any shape or form portray myself as a visionary, Sean. I feed off ideas and people like yourself. I remember the change you brought to Avon and Somerset Constabulary. But when I was first considering whether I might be capable of being a chief officer, wasn't long after the terrible murders of Holly and Jessica in Soham. And actually, those two little girls were murdered because police forces didn't share information and weren't cognizant of the data that they were in possession of. And since those times, in the early 2000s, data has proliferated. Instead of dealing with paper, we're dealing with millions of pieces of data entering the constabulary every day. So one of the things that I remember the first time you explained this concept you had of a sort of a control room for all of our data, where you could show on dials what was happening, merging and blending all of our databases. And I remember the conversation, Sean, and I love data. I feel I am, statistics was something I studied at university. I said, I don't think you can do that, Sean. And you said, you said, I can. And I said, well, you've got 3 months to prove to me it works. And at the end of 3 months, we agreed this was so good. It had to touch data driven. It had to touch every corner of the organization. But a second element of technology, and this illustrates how services and society develops. When I was chief in Hampshire, my officers, and no different to anywhere else in the country, members of the public were recording what was happening on their smartphones. And a smart guy walked into my office and said, let's run an evidence-based trial with the University of Portsmouth on body-worn video. Yeah. And Hampshire, we proved the benefit. Some of it expected, some unexpected. But Hampshire went on to be the first big police force in the world to personally issue body-worn video. And since that time, I've led on it for the UK. And we now have 70,000 cameras out. So outstanding policing is now a blend of the traditional, which is teamwork, values, leadership, people, service, dedication, vocation, everything that policing has been doing for 200 years. But that's not enough. We now need data and technology to augment those brilliant traditional values. And actually, how is technology influencing us? It's half of the deal, Sean. Probably the biggest revolution, and we've not talked too much about it yet, is data-driven, data-literate change in policing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And creating that data-driven culture and literacy in the organisation. I see it from the organisations I've worked with around the world, and the ones that succeed really have your top leaders, people like yourself, Andy, that really understand that and understand how to lead that in an organisation, and those people you work with. What's your thoughts on leadership within creating those cultures that you're looking for?
Well, we need to create tools that are genuinely useful for people. And I remember when I started as my current job in 2016, the constabulary was going through a lot of change, and there was officers and staff were fearful. What if there was some information that meant that person X was dangerous and they failed to protect person Y because they didn't know about it? So, in terms of leadership, first of all, we need to understand the problems and understand the context. We need to listen much more than we talk. And then we need to give people tools and equipment that help them do their job, that help them deal with bureaucracy and the problems they face. Now, actually, one of the problems that you helped me solve is that even Somerset Constabulary absorbs probably almost 10 million pieces of data a day. And actually, that's a needle in a haystack. And what the officers and staff needed was something to help them rationalize what was relevant that would help them make smart decisions about who was dangerous, who was vulnerable, where should they patrol, what should they do in terms of how do they augment their decision making with good data and knowledge. And so, first of all, you've got to give them tools that they see are relevant and helpful. But actually, and this must frustrate people in the technology industry, if you can give people the best tools and equipment in the world, unless they know what to do with it, and that's the leadership bit, then actually the money is almost wasted. So you come back to the body worn video. Actually, at worst, it's a passive piece of equipment that is rarely used, that officers wear. At best, the super users use it like movie directors. They talk about their powers, they say how they're feeling, they talk about their risk assessment, their power of entry, and they make sure they capture an early account, any relevant evidence, damaged property, injuries. And so it is leadership of technological change is actually cultural change. You have to start a movement. You can't simply tell people what to do these days. It's about influence.
Yeah, and it's bringing people along, and I think it's not always sort of written down on a project plan, is it? But that magic bit is where you get people engaged in working with technology, with the people in technology, bringing those two things together to really create excitement, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they feel like they've shaped that journey.
Yeah.
I think that's from my days thinking back. We had a lot of those operational people flying in and out of the office.
Yeah.
Always wanting to understand and see more and find those nuggets that can help them do their jobs better. So I get that, and hopefully other people will get that too, Andy.
Well, I think in a traditional approach to promoting best use of technology is to classroom driven. Sit people down, tell them what it does, tell them how to use it. Actually, we've significantly moved away from that. We have a cohort of about 180 digispocs, people who are passionate about technology and data embedded throughout the organization. They shape the offering through working with the developers about what's needed. And then actually their colleagues look over their shoulders and say, what's that you're doing, when they're testing these new products out. And as you say, you get a sense of excitement and a real appetite. We want to use it. And that's, I think, is a progressive way of leading and promoting best use of technology. Very dynamic.
And the proof's in the pudding. You've got some 3,500 users, 900 users a day, maybe. A large percentage of your operational teams, cops on the street using it. That's saying that it's working for you, isn't it?
Well, in terms of our data applications, some of which are predictive and some of which are visual. They're all visual, but some of them are predictive within that. Some of the data and processes that they carry actually are essential to people's everyday work. And I call that hardwiring. That's the hardwiring. The soft wiring is that people love it. They love the access to the technology and data, because I'm lucky enough to employ professionals. Professionals want to do their best. So give them the tools, the technology, the data, the information to learn and improve. And that's a phrase that I heard you coin in our organization that I've used ever since, Sean, which is about democratizing our data use.
Yeah. And a lot of people talk about it, but don't necessarily always deliver it. And again, today is about learning those lessons, and storytelling and those success stories. Have you got anything great to share, like a success story people would really get something from?
Well, every year I run around January, February, I run a series of roadshows where I talk. It's a talk. It's not a talk it's a discussion to all of the leaders in the organization, and anyone who's curious or interested, constructive or critical, they're all welcome. That's how we make progress through challenge. But that's the roadshows I did this year. I bought my super users, my Digispocs, actually came with me to talk about their brilliant stories, which, Sean, their brilliant stories are always more interesting than mine. That's for sure. And so that's what gives me a buzz, is to listen to them. But one of the first areas that you and I worked on in terms of visualizing a process and populating it with the data that told the story was our call handling.
Yeah.
When I got my job, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Sue Mount-Stevens, said that our 15% dropout rates for 101 calls were unacceptable. And so you flushed applications and data through our command and control center with some brilliant leaders in that environment, and actually simply visualizing the data, sharing it, honing the processes have meant that since we've done that, our dropout rates have been 2 to 3%. Now that is remarkable in UK policing for 101 calls. We have 5,000 calls a day. It's a very high volume business, and they need to be answered quickly. So I think what we're achieving now of a 2 to 3% dropout and good answer times actually will challenge anything that's happening in the private sector. And what achieved that was the visualization of the data. I mean, another example about how in visualizing data, you empower people to deal with it. Believe it or not, we had over 4,000 people that we wanted to talk to about crimes. You could call them suspects in Avon and Somerset, just through sharing that data on officers' digital twins. We call it My Work, and giving people the ownership of, I didn't know that we need to speak to Sean. We saw a reduction in our wanted list of over half in 6 months. So actually, just visualizing something, when you have a data-driven culture, and people will act on it. We've seen the same happen around data quality, for example, file quality. So some of the most vexed and difficult issues in my organization, through sharing the data, democratizing it, people solve the problems for you.
Absolutely. And I was used to refer it to tin opening the organization, because it over years it sort of accumulates a lot of myths and a lot of hearsay, and you always need to start with the data, some sort of data exploration, data driven sort of understanding. And I always remember the example of when you'd have neighborhood policing responding to grade ones and grade twos, and I always remember the case where there's the noise in the organization saying, well, we're always going to grade one, we're not doing, haven't got time to do the neighborhood sort of preventative work. Actually, when you unpick the data, it was only certain times, certain people in certain instances. It wasn't a wholesale approach, and the attrition for abstraction was very different to what the organization kind of was led to believe. But until that was made democratized or transparent, it didn't shift or change opinions. There were some people, but not at the scale that it was. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's I think it's important in modern society where opinions tend to be polarized, binary even, to be factual. If you're not factual, you're driven by anecdote. Anecdote has a powerful place in our opinion forming and our decision making, but it's really important to be factual. So, for example, on data quality, if you're going to be data driven, your data quality has got to be good. Actually, and so if your data quality is not good, you could, without being factual, make a decision to train all of your staff in X, Y, Z to improve data quality. Actually, if you're factual about your data, you'll realize it's a Pareto type rule. You need to focus your attention on a small number of people who are probably unknowingly making the mistake time and time again. This is where our concept of the digital twin forms. We share with our staff and officers every aspect of their performance. And we don't do it in a way which is punitive or
Yeah.
big brother, or that gives people fear. We're saying,
Yeah.
you're a professional. Here's the information about your performance and activities. Use this to continually learn and improve. And most people want to do that.
Absolutely. And if you think about, you said at the start around the resourcing, not enough resources, you need to be more efficient and effective. And again, people, process, systems, that people element, understanding, and in a positive way, positive culture. That has got to be a key strategic way of organisations making the best use of their resources, isn't it? So that's great to hear.
And I mean, we have lots of assets, Sean. People are a fantastic asset, but data for many organizations is the greatest unused asset. I used to uh, um, witness each Christmas a member of my family making a chicken out of a tea towel. It was a wonderful and an entertaining thing, but actually that was where it ended. There's no point to it. And for people who are business analysts or performance analysts,
Yeah.
who maybe spend a lot of time preparing a beautiful product with great
Yeah.
insight, it must be incredibly frustrating if people don't use it. And so actually, that's what we should do with our data. We should use it to make smart decisions, to understand and share the concept and draw us to our vision, which is outstanding policing in my world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure many people hear chicken and tea cloths from chief constable. So that's the first today for me. But actually, I may have heard it before, possibly. I can't quite remember. But
Yeah,
that's a great example of it's so what it's got to do something, hasn't it?
yeah,
And
yeah,
make great things, but it's
yeah,
got to actually deliver something in the world.
yeah.
And I mean, there's a lesson in itself, but thinking broader around those lessons learned. Anything that stands out for you that people should be really thinking about on their journey?
I think when you get to my level of service and the experience, my inspiration comes from the people around me, and
Yeah.
they sometimes are the most junior, possibly even the least experienced in the organization. And so, what I talk about in terms of leadership now in the 2020s isn't about control; it's about influence. How do we influence our workforce? How do we listen to them? And actually, coming back to data, how do we use data to influence other organizations? Because the police aren't big enough on their own to succeed. And I actually think that in a debate about should something be localized, should it be centralized? Well, it's a matter of opinion. And the only reason to localize is to centralize again, or vice versa. Data is the way through this. So we've structured Avon and Somerset Constabulary in a way that protects what can only and best be delivered locally, and delivers centrally and strategically what can more efficiently and effectively be delivered centrally. All of that would be impossible without good data and good
Yeah.
technology. So I think that philosophy and that approach can be replicated in regions and nationally. And we do live in a world where there's a continuous, very vexed argument about should public services be run centrally or locally. Well, both, and use the data to inform you is my answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a firm believer. You treat it as a strategic, asset. You've got to nurture it, look after it, explore, and that's quite a differentiator. A lot of people won't live and breathe the true power of data, whereas the examples you've been given today, and how you've progressed your journey. Again, it's a great blueprint for others to learn from, and I'm still learning from it. Things I see and hear. Your COVID, I know you posted something on LinkedIn around how that was your data was really supporting your response, Andy. And again, it's fascinating, and people were really interested in how you were doing that. And again, it's a great highlight for people to say, what can we learn from people like yourself?
Well, as I said earlier, Sean, still learning from others, but my brilliant team got that COVID series of apps landing page up within 7 days. So we were able to understand of the thousands of reports we're getting, many online because we can do that. Where were the concerns? What should we do with our patrolling officers around education, enforcement, and encouragement? How do we deploy them? How productive is it? Where's the risk? both internally in our workforce about groups of people being knocked over and sick, and externally. And the data-driven approach to COVID has seen us drive many efficiencies and improvements, and actually, believe it or not, in health and well-being as well. So we've used it to help communications and support good morale internally, which is why through COVID, believe it or not, we've actually had a much lower sickness level than we would normally experience, even though these are amongst the most demanding times I've ever faced in my career in policing. So we're all still very much learning about it, Sean.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, ringing out in my ears there, 7 days, and
Yeah.
you know, I see organisations 3, 4, 5 months still not got nothing out the door. You know, there's still nothing to show for actually sometimes quite large sums of money invested. And I think to develop that concept of getting things quickly into the business, working, adding value, yeah, people have got to kind of take. Well, I think got to take note and think there's different ways of doing things. It doesn't have to be this sort of traditional, long-winded, risk-averse process. It's proportionate, isn't it?
Yeah, we need to move quickly in today's society, otherwise we're constantly behind the curve. The police response to COVID has been praised nationally by, amongst others, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. But where we have received some criticism nationally at Select Committee is not being not commanding our own data in terms of what we've done, why we've done it, and what the outcomes have been. And there's a frustration for me there because, as I said, within 7 days in Avon and Somerset, we had that up and running automatically, 24/7, 365. In a way, on that landing page, it didn't cost me any money. It didn't go sick. It didn't have rest days, and yet we were unable as a service to magnify that up nationally. And if we are to continue with our current policing structure of local police forces, many merits to that, but some disbenefits as well. We, as a service, we must command our data better. We must do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, moving forward, thinking about the future, Andy, I know you've done some fantastically exciting things in the past. What have you got coming up? You know, what's next? What's next for you guys?
Well, we have a vision of being an outstanding force, outstanding policing for everyone, and that can't mean that you're all things to all people. It means that you need to understand what you're going to be the best in the world at, protecting vulnerable people, trust and confidence, the magic stardust of British policing. We do think that we are an incredibly progressive force around data analytics, including predictive analytics. But actually, if I'm frank about where we are, I think we're still in the foothills of this. I think we've got a lot to learn. So we will continue our journey. We hopefully will work more and more in partnership with the public and the private sector so that we deliver even lower cost, higher quality services to people. And I've also put on my LinkedIn site some pioneering work that we're doing around robotics. So robotic automation, which you simply can't do unless you A, understand your process, and B, have reliable data. So there is a congruency to this progress we're making.
Yeah, that's really exciting, Andy, and you know, it's great to see you pushing the boundaries around that RPA stuff. That is exciting. What really stood out for me in that culture of data was having the confidence to, you know, explore and then show that work back to the senior leadership team, people like yourself. It was that empowerment to be able to do that, and you know, the support in doing that. And I always looked forward to when, you know, people like yourself and your chief officer colleagues and senior leaders would come into the department and the organisation. You know, going back some time, it would be the opposite, a culture of you didn't want to see the chief wandering through. But I think, you know, times have changed. And I think that for me is a defining part of leadership where people want to see you, want to show you the innovation. And it's a cycle of that building. So
I guess I mean, a curious mindset is a good thing, especially as far as data is concerned. An important challenge we have in policing is to take our public with us to maintain trust in it, and we do that through ethics ethics committees and transparency. But I think the sort of question that you're talking about in terms of leadership is, do leaders allow you to bask in a warm glow of leadership, or do they actually send a shiver down your spine? And people people don't flourish if they're afraid. People don't speak their mind. And I need people around me that are prepared to challenge me and are courageous enough to say, I think I see a better way of doing this. And you have to work on that every day.
Yeah. And that's what I've taken away from working in Avon Somerset, Andy. So again, personally, thanks very much for that. And I'm sure anyone who experiences that will take it with them as well. I'm just conscious of your time, so I really do appreciate you sharing that great insight with the audience today. And thank you for keeping Avon and Somerset safe. I live in Avon and Somerset, and I think I always have a huge amount of confidence in the policing that's been delivered. Never perfect, nothing's ever perfect, but I know that when I really need someone there to support me in my time of need, I know someone will come. So thank you so much for today, and good luck. Good luck with all the innovation.
And my pleasure, Sean. You're always an honorary member of Avon and Somerset Constabulary.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. See you again soon. Bye.
Bye.